Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, The Evil Within on PS4. There was a point where the concept of survival horror was an unpopular one within the gaming sphere, especially during the 2010s. But what happens when the man accidentally responsible for one of the most dynamic shifts in gameplay for survival horror, and action games in general, has to recreate that success? Let's discuss that with 2014's The Evil Within. If there's one thing we can say is true about gamers, is that we love to argue about things like, what is the best story in games? What are the best graphics? Which console do you play on, and why are you wrong about that and possibly gay because of your choice? Why don't you just spend hours a day on Linux operating systems pirating everything when instead you simply pay for entertainment like a capitalist pig? Why aren't there more gravity-defying giant anime titties and everything? And who let all these females into play? Ew. You know, the important questions. But one thing that is not in dispute is the impact Resident Evil 4 had on the gaming landscape in 2005. Headed up by director Shinji Mikami, and attempting to redefine horror, RE4 instead changed the direction of survival or action horror and upended the third-person shooter and paved the way for a lot of games through the 2000s and 2010s, including Dead Space, Gears of War, The Last of Us, Grand Theft Auto, Batman Arkham Asylum, and many others. However, Mikami himself was not a happy man within Capcom, especially after the breakup and folding back in of Mikami's hand-picked team of Clover Studios employees back into Capcom. Mikami then transferred to Platinum Games, where he worked on about 2 games before leaving in late 2000s. However, he was not done, and by 2010, it was announced that Mikami was back with a brand new studio known as Tango Gameworks, which was soon acquired by Western developers ZeniMax Media, owners of Bethesda Game Studios, who were flush off the success of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, and had been on a studio acquiring binge that would lead them to also bringing us, among other things, Dishonored, Prey, the 2017 remake version, and a new home for the long-lived Wolfenstein series. Mikami, too, would have a new game that would take us all back to the roots of survival horror. Known as Psycho Break in Japan, a name that gives away the game a little too much if you ask me, The Evil Within was very much a game in the Resident Evil mold, even though Mikami didn't want that. Famously, Mikami was not pleased with what ZeniMax asked when he pitched the concept to them, as ZeniMax wanted him to recreate RE4, but for them to publish. In the years since its release, Mikami has lamented the story of RE4, being quite mad at himself for how it turned out, saying that after the troubled production development of that game and its multiple false starts, the game that came out was stitched together over a weekend out of leftover plot threads and go-nowhere ideas he had been developing because time was running out, which caused a lot of unusual tone shifts. Yet, that game was a sales blockbuster and is beloved worldwide, myself included in that fan group. He wanted a fresh start to make The Evil Within more a survival horror experience he thought it should have been. ZeniMax, however, only saw dollar signs and wanted what they wanted. I can only imagine the pitch meeting for The Evil Within concluded with some fat old white dude wearing a standard issue black seersucker suit, cigar in one hand, and withering fingers encrusted with diamond and gold rings, walked across the boardroom and put his hands on both Mikami's and his interpreter's shoulders and said, "Shinji, baby, that's all great. Give us Resident Evil 4 again," concluding with a painful, intimidating squeeze that ground their collarbones before the ZeniMax investors left the room. The Evil Within begins with our protagonist, Detective Sebastian Castellanos, and his associates, Detective Joseph Oda and quote-unquote junior detective Julie Kidman. No such thing in American policing. You're either a detective or you are not. 30 seconds of research would have told you that, Shinji. And they are racing to a scene of mass murder at Beacon Mental Hospital, smack dab in the middle of Crimson with a letter K City, the metropolis in which they all work as police officers. Allusions to Midwestern Raccoon City aside, it's an all-points bulletin with every cop in town, so like maybe 20 by my count, including these 3, no SWAT in sight, arrives at this massive old edifice filled with butchered remains of staff and patients. Not far in, they find a semi-conscious doctor who mumbles something about a patient named Ruvik, and Seb goes to a bank of monitors, only to see 3 cops with guns getting sliced up by a Dragon Ball Z side character, said character who then turns his scarred, cowl-wearing face to the camera and teleports behind Sebastian and stabs him in the face with something. Detective Seb then comes to hanging upside down in a 1920s meat locker with a discount Leatherface checking him before wandering off to loudly debone a human body in the next room. Seb, yes, I'll keep calling him that because I don't feel like typing his name over and over again, then swings like James Bond to grab a left-behind knife, frees himself, steals a key, involving actual stealth mechanics in survival horror for one of the first times, and escapes, only to trip an alarm that draws discount Leatherface and his chainsaw. We then have to pilot Seb in his escape, which he is hit in the leg by the saw and has to limp through a psychotic funhouse of spinning saw blades, fall down into a huge vat of blood and offal, and finally limp through a cat-and-mouse hiding game of lockers and crawl spaces trying to avoid being chopped to pieces by this nut job, until he escapes up an elevator and out into the hospital, into a waiting ambulance, where a nameless cop, Oda and Kidman, the doctor he met a bit ago, and another patient named Leslie, escape in said ambulance. That is until the world goes lopsided. Buildings crash together like the Titanic meeting an iceberg, and entire city blocks begin spinning like they are on turntables, when the ambulance goes off a cliff and everyone is thrown clear into rural Spain. Oh, fuck, here we go again. I'm not kidding about this. The second episode of the game is already playing like Resident Evil 4. Mikami must have taken ZeniMax's demands to heart. The cop dead and everyone missing, Seb draws his revolver and begins shuffling his way into the dark forest until he meets his first person near a shack, some poor soul who suddenly sprouts a barbed wire face mask wrap and attacks like a Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead remake speedy zombie. These are the Haunted, who will be our mainstay enemy throughout the game. Now luckily, Detective Seb has a few tricks up his sleeve that Leon S. Kennedy did not at this time, such as crouching, sneaking, and stabbing enemies in the back with that knife he picked up for instant kills, and the ability to lay traps to help conserve ammunition. Mastering these skills early is key to survival in the Evil Within, and you can even do a bit of light crafting. Dead enemies will also leave behind a heap of green jelly, which you can collect. Soon Seb finds a photograph in a shed that plays old-timey music, and a mirror that shatters the second he looks at it. Come on, game. Seb doesn't look that bad. That when you touch it, transports you to a not-so-safe safe house of the game, the mental ward of some other hospital, possibly Beacon. There you will meet the more buxom sister of the nurse from Silent Hill, the first game that is, who clearly is either a robot or is emotionally dead, who alludes to Seb's own mental state, that he may be a patient as well. Plus, she guards the wall of lockers where you can find extra goodies and ammo if you find keys throughout the game and unlock them, and introduces us to the chair, an electric chair-looking thing hooked up to needles and shit that if Seb sits in it, it will shock him into being better, depending on how much green jelly he uses. That's right, folks. The Evil Within even has light RPG mechanics. He can leave any time he likes, but only back into the nightmare of the game. From there, Seb must sneak, kill, and run like hell through rural Italy or wherever, being chased by the Haunted until he lands in an old-world Eurotrash village that would make the village from Resident Evil 8 blush, where he must sneak around, unlocking doors and shit, in service of finding a way to unlock the massive gate at the other end of town. We again meet the doctor from Beacon, who is looking for his patient Leslie, and who is trapped here too. It is here that we find our most versatile weapon in the whole game, the Agony Crossbow, that can launch harpoons, explosive bolts, electricity. It does it all, baby, and you can craft ammo for it. To get through the gate, you need the chainsaw last seen in the hands of Discount Leatherface, and wouldn't you know it, he's chained up in the village barn like a mad bull. Instead of just killing him while he's trapped, Seb has to free him and then gets chased around the village by him, either blasting him with whatever weapon you have, or hiding in lockers and under beds and backstabbing him to death, which you can get an achievement for, if you're into that. Once done, Seb breaks the chain on the gate and the saw as well, and leaves with the doctor. If anything I just said sounds familiar, that you could swear you just saw this in recent horror games, well, you did. I'm damn sure some notes were cribbed for RE Village, RE7, and the recent, at the time of this recording, RE4 remake. Mikami is considered a horror master, and so I'm not surprised Capcom would steal his ideas again. And Mikami was also recycling ideas he previously had, too. In any case, Seb and the doctor wind up in another mystery village at some sort of rural clinic, lorded over by the doctor's brother, who is dissecting the haunted and is a monster himself, mad as could be and literally scratching the flesh off of his skull, claiming it itches. Tasty. They kill the fucker, and our doctor friend doesn't seem that broken up about it, and they find Leslie, who leads them into some kind of bunker where Seb confronts Ruvik for the first time, after a blood wall jump scare straight out of The Shining. Ruvik, and here's one of my biggest complaints about the game, sucks as an antagonist. He's not scary, he's just a weird scarred emo boy, and leans too much into the mystic teleportation powers, as I said earlier, like a Dragon Ball villain. He's bad, but he's who we have to deal with. Ruvik kidnaps Leslie, and we are jumped to some sort of new phase of the game. We leave behind rural Poland and wind up falling down a hallway after industrial hallway until we meet our first really big scare of the game, named Laura, a ring-inspired lanky-haired and multi-armed spider lady who teleports through blood pools and burns really easily, so get your Molotovs and firebolts ready. You get those too. I'll say one thing. Mikami and Tango did not skimp on arming Sebastian for his confrontations. You can even punch if you are desperate. But Laura scared the shit out of me the first time I saw her, as I wasn't expecting it. Then a chase begins through shifting hallways until you fight her for the first time in the bowels of an incinerator. From there, it is hallway upon hallway, occasionally running from Ruvik and his plot armor, until you get caught up in several repeat siege battles of abandoned buildings and construction complexes with Joseph, who you find again, until you have to save him from a monster dog, and you two bust into an abandoned hospital where you must siege fight more haunted while saving Kidman from a Houdini water trap before she drowns. By this point, I had toned shift whiplash, but this is supposed to represent something. That something comes right after this segment, when you get separated again. That you are not in a real place, but that you and everyone you know is instead trapped inside Ruvik's mind and a machine called STEM. And here we go with the supervillain shit. Ruvik, it turns out, is a sad genius boy from rural fucking somewhere whose family was involved in cult activity shit and warned him and his sister Laura not to talk to locals who hated and feared them for being murderous cultists. Well, as you can guess, this goes wrong. The villagers kill his folks, burn Laura, his sister, as a witch, and half-burn Ruvik as well. He escapes and becomes a genius science man, and designs STEM so he can travel back into his own memories to relive his happy incest childhood with Laura. However, as science men need money for their science shit, he gets hooked up with a paramilitary company called Mobius, who wants STEM for their own purposes. Ruvik calibrates STEM to only work with his brain to get back at Mobius for trying to steal STEM. So Mobius kills Ruvik and installs his actual fucking brain, like he's Robocop or something, into the machine and sets it up in Beacon Hospital for experimentation purposes. Holy hot shit. What the fuck kind of plot twist is this? And how do we find all this out? Because we have to travel into the memories of Ruvik's own RE-style Spencer fucking mansion and run from room to room avoiding Ruvik's unstoppable ghost while collecting memory chunks. And then see Laura and he running through sunlit fields of sunflowers until the local villagers use him and his sister for kindling at the cult night barbecue. And this is the halfway mark of the game. We're not even done yet. Christ. Also, along the way at safe houses, to this point, we have been learning more about Detective Seb's background in easily missed files on him. Specifically that he had a family, another detective on the force who he married and they had a daughter who died in a fire, and his wife soon divorced him and left, unable to bear the grief. What the fuck does this have to do with anything? I assume set up our protagonist's tragic backstory, and why he is such a survivalist inside this madhouse. But it is out of place. With these revelations, we find the safe house is getting a lot less safe now that Ruvik knows that we know that he knows that we know this is all bullshit, and the game tries to steer hard back to psychological horror before we get locked into an endless prison shower room fight against one of the game's recurring bosses known as the Keeper, aka Boxhead, an honestly great pursuer boss who keeps coming back after being born from his own safe for a head, and who carries a warhammer who can be taken down but needs to be escaped by puzzles that take place during his fight. This was one of the few times I felt truly challenged and concerned that I could not win the game. But I made it. From here, Seb escapes into a destroyed American city, and we must swim from building to building as the city floods and the streets have cancer-covered sharks hunting in them, alongside Kidman, until Seb, Kidman, and Joseph end up in a school bus driving through hordes of the haunted until an honest-to-Christ kaiju spider monster rips the roof off the bus, and they have to speed through a city full of collapsing buildings and burned-out cars in a school bus, may I remind you, until they lose the beast and end up in a turret section. Yes, you heard me. In the midst of this survival horror game, you have to climb into a gun-mounted Humvee and mow down hordes of the haunted until you clear a path for the bus. And once this is done, Kidman immediately crashes the thing, and Seb is alone again, sneaking through a Silent Hill 2 apartment complex, avoiding Boxhead as he stumbles around like Pyramid Head, killing any haunted he comes across. From here, my memories get a little fuzzy, I assume from the rapidly mounting PTSD, as to what happens next. But at some point, the whole fucking thing begins to fall apart, and we are in a fiery murder basement trying to turn Spider Laura into charcoal briquettes for the last time, and we meet up with Leslie once more to learn that Ruvik is interested in him because he's trying to transfer his consciousness into Leslie to live again. From there, the last few stages are a goddamn jumble of resource-draining battles through prisons, hospitals, hallways, and other places outside time and space, fighting multiple Boxheads at once, hordes of enemies, and finally an arena battle against the haunted and Discount Leatherface, despite the fact that we killed him hours ago, and who is now armed with a rocket launcher because of course he is. A battle that I had nothing left for, and finally won on the 10th try due to a lot of lucky resource drops, a thrown bottle, and my fists. And we get to see Seb's physical body hidden in Beacon's Bell Tower Science Lab, laying in a tub of milk and hooked up to STEM, right before we are hurled into the heart of a tornado in the ruins of Crimson City to fight Ruvik's final form, which looks suspiciously like Osmond Sadler's final form from RE4, because if you're going to steal someone's ideas, they might as well be your own. And Seb has to hop from armored Humvee to armored Humvee, shooting Ruvik with 50 caliber machine guns, until you can animate protagonist this shit out of the whole thing, and grab a rocket launcher from the teeth of the whirlwind, and shoot Monster Ruvik in the fucking face with it. Because of course you do. I mean, that's how every Resident Evil game ends all the way through number 5. I didn't play 6, so don't ask. This is so RE4 again, it physically hurts. Seb even reappears in Stem's main room and pulls a Ruvik's brain jar out of the machine and smashes it on the ground, killing him. The game ends with Seb and Kidman stumbling out of the hospital they started in, Joseph not dead, but missing and possibly lost in STEM, and Leslie walking away as well, purposeful and clear-headed, with a sly, sidelong glance cast at Sebastian, indicating that Leslie is no longer in control, but Ruvik is. And Seb just lets him go. Holy fuck. So, how did the critics take The Evil Within? Well, it did okay. Mostly middle to good scores, lots of praise for the idea of the game, good scares and creepy environments, but marred by technical problems, and like it seems, stuck in the past. Stuck in the past, you say? Compared to what during that time, oh wise critics? Well, let's break out a few of those competitors from 2014, shall we? Grand Theft Auto 5, a game trying real hard to recapture the magic of 2004 San Andreas and ending up as lifeless and flavorless as the average McDonald's cheeseburger. Dark Souls 2, who only now, a decade later, is classified as a misunderstood gem, but was hated at the time. The Last of Us Remastered, A game that only exists as it does because of RE4, and the less said about that, the better. And Destiny, a wannabe Halo and Unreal Tournament clone with overdone voice acting and squad tactics. Sounds like all those are stuck in the past too, you utter cluster of pus-dripping anal warts. I swear these critics are the dumbest fucks on the planet sometimes. Well, The Evil Within sold well enough for horror games too, mostly I think because of the pedigree, but was quickly forgotten when the next shiny thing came out. But it did well enough for a sequel, and we'll get to that another time. However, here's my experience with the game. In all honesty, I like this game a lot. It's as stupid as fuck, but in an amazing way. It has so many good and shit ideas sewn together in a loose confederation of a game that I can't help but love it, even when I'm seething in anger. It is literally Mikami ripping off Mikami, and just about everyone else, almost getting his revenge against both Capcom and ZeniMax in a way. And I'm all here for the man getting his just desserts and reusing his own ideas in a different way. Hell, I do that constantly. And the latter RE games then rip off The Evil Within. Yes, the scares are good and genuine. And when they aren't, you just have to laugh at this Japanese interpretation of the American experience and American action and horror. But The Evil Within is still a problematic favorite of mine. The experience can be harsh, the drops of good and ammo a bit too random, and the shifts between set pieces and tone are just too wild to even know from time to time what is going on. And claiming it's the fragments of Rubik's mind doesn't cover the glaring flaws in the writing. It could have used a second hand on the director's chair. And it really does feel too much, beat for beat, like we've played this before. Well, we had no choice, as I've said. But is it worth your time? Yes. If you can look past the bullshit, it absolutely is. But you didn't get that recommendation from me. It is a problematic favorite, after all. The Evil Within is one of the corniest, hammiest survival horror or action horror or your granny's asshole horror or whatever we're calling the subgenres now that I've ever played, but I love it nonetheless. But that love does not come without conditions and extends only so far as one might imagine. But don't worry, that love is only an illusion. It's all in your mind, detective. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, and Masked Llama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.